At one time, Jesus was asked a question. He was asked which one of the 613 laws, Jewish laws in the Torah, which one of those laws was most important? They were trying to trick him by asking that kind of question. But he gave a very profound answer. He said there are two laws that are the main laws. The first one is love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, with all your strength. And the second, he said, was like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All right? And then he said, those two laws sum up all of the laws, all 613 of them, and the prophets. All the things that the prophets had been saying to the Israelites, the people from Israel and from Judah, that they should be doing or shouldn't be doing. That's all summed up with those two answers. Love God with all your mind, your heart, your soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. That's very good advice. And that sums up the 10 Commandments. The first 3 of them have to do with love of God, and then the next 7 have to do with love of neighbor. And so what we're going to do is to go through each one of the 10 commandments and talk about how we would honor that commandment and then how we would disobey that commandment. And it may seem that the commandments are too simple. There's a commandment, do not commit adultery. Another one, do not steal. Another one, do not kill. But they're more involved than just that. And the reason they are is because, remember, Jesus took the law in the new covenant and he raised the bar, right? He raised the bar. And he said, you have heard it said, and he would tell about a law of the old covenant, and he'd say, but I say to you now, I'm raising the bar, and he would tell how that is going to be different in the new covenant. All right? So each one of these 10 commandments is expanded, and I have the expansion for you tonight. Okay? These are the 10 commandments. Remember I told you last time that you might see them listed two different ways. Some people make 2 commandments out of the first one, and they combine the last 2. That's perfectly all right. You might see it both ways, but this is the way they are listed in the Catechism and the way that they're listed in all Catholic textbooks. It wouldn't hurt to memorize those sometime. But here's the first commandment. I am the Lord your God. You shall not have false gods before me. Okay? That sounds simple. And most of us would think, well, I don't have any problem with the first commandment. And it's the most important one. Because I am not building a golden calf and putting it in my living room up on a pedestal and bowing down to it. I don't have a false god before the real God. But when you come to think of it, there's a lot more to it than just that. So let's look at how we would be faithful to the first commandment and each commandment before we look at how we would sin against it. The way we would be faithful to the first commandment is when we demonstrate our faith and our trust in God. Okay? When other people who know us know that we believe in God and that we honor Him and that we trust Him, that we look up to Him, that we pray to Him, that we have a relationship with God. And that relationship is something that means something to us, and it affects the decisions we make in our lives. When we demonstrate that, we're honoring the first commandment. When we actually let God be God in our lives, we might know that God exists, We might fear God. We might occasionally pray to God, especially when we need something, but we still don't let him actually be God in our lives. We only let him out or take him out when we need something. Otherwise, he's kind of backstage, not on center stage, not a big part of our lives. But if we let God be God and give him a prominent place in our lives, center stage, then we're honoring the first commandment. When we reflect the love and goodness of God by the way that we live, when others see us and what we do and what we say and how we treat other people, when we reflect the image of God, who is love, whose image we were made in, then we're honoring the first commandment. Right? When we ascribe to God the honor and glory that is due him as creator and sustainer of the universe. That's why I started the prayer this evening the way that I did, because of the first commandment. I said, Heavenly Father, we ascribe to you all praise, glory, and honor because you are the creator and sustainer of the universe. It was in love that you brought us into existence, and in love that you gave us your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. That's a great prayer of praise. Okay? That's called a doxology. A doxology is a prayer of pure praise. And if we look at our prayer lives, are the only times that we pray when we need something, when we're in trouble? Or do we pray just because we love God and want to honor him? We want to give him praise and glory. Okay? When we do, we're honoring the first commandment. And when we acknowledge God's sovereignty in our lives, in other words, if our families know that the decisions that we make as an individual or as a family, that God is part of those decisions. We do what is good in his sight, and we avoid what's evil in his sight, and we consult him when making decisions. Sometimes there's big decisions, maybe changing a job, changing a school, what college to go to. You guys will be thinking about that soon, right? And so these are big decisions. Scott's going to go on a cruise. That's a big decision that he made to go on that cruise, take that vacation with the family. So do people know, do our families and friends know that God is a big part of our lives and he's involved in the decisions that we make? That's an important thing and something that when we do, we honor the first commandment. Right? Okay. So how could we sin? Now we know how we honor. These are things that we owe God. It's honor due God. So how would we sin against the first commandment? Well, one is a sin of omission by not doing those things that honor the first commandment. Or it could be a sin of commission, and that would be doing one of these things. The first thing is pantheism. Who remembers what pantheism is? Yes, that's right. Right. Exactly right. Very good. We did have that before, but it was a while ago on one of our first evenings. Pantheism is when you ascribe to something or someone in creation that is part of creation the attributes that belong only to God. If you think a crystal has some power, or a Ouija board, or do you think a person like a fortune teller has powers, or tarot cards, those types of things, all of that are examples of pantheism. Astrology, if you really believed that and then that directed your lives, then that would be a pantheistic practice, right? How about creating false gods out of sports, movie, and television stars? You know, sometimes we adore these people so much that we want to do whatever they do. if they endorse a particular type of clothing, well, we'll buy it, or any other kind of product. Not that that's necessarily bad, but when we go too far with that, and we want to be just like them, and sometimes they're not really good models, well, that's sinning against the first commandment. We're making a false god out of something else, someone else. We could have, and the church is accused of this a lot, we could have a devotion that becomes an obsession. There are people that are devoted to the Blessed Mother in such a way that it becomes an obsession, and the Blessed Mother, Mary, actually replaces God in their lives. Right? And therefore, they sin against the first commandment. Scott?
Is it fair and safe to say the word fetish? Sort of like
a fetish, yeah. A fetish could be, in some cases, a sin against the first commandment too. You have a particular fetish that becomes an obsession. Yeah. You could make idols out of possessions. You love your bank account. You love your car. You love your clothes. So much that you would do anything for them. You love them more than you love God himself. Even workaholism could be a sin against the first commandment. When I was building my business, the business that I sold 3 years ago, my son runs it for the company that bought it now. I've been working there part-time for the last 3 years. That ends at the end of March. Lucky me. But anyway, when I was building that business, all I cared about was that business. 24/7, that's all that was on my mind. I could care less about God, and even the family was low on the totem pole because the almighty business was the highest thing. And that's not the way it should be. My priorities were wrong. It should have been Jesus first, others, especially my family, second, myself third, and the business down below that somewhere, right? Yeah.
Well, and also what you're saying about sports and movie stars and that, people feel that same way about sports. I mean, some people use fishing or golf and as a god.
Yes. In fact, on Sunday mornings, instead of going to Mass, they'll be on the golf course. And sometimes that rules their lives, becomes an obsession. I know a guy, he's from Gadsden, Alabama, and it led to a divorce of 2 wives because he was so obsessed. In fact, he lost his business. He's a pediatric dentist. And he lost his business because he was so obsessed with playing golf. He would have patients scheduled. Right? Parents taking off from work to bring their kids to the pediatric dentist, and somebody comes in and, hey, Richard, you want to play golf? Oh yeah, I'll be right there. Right? And just leave. Yeah. He actually went to a psychiatrist and worked on that, and I hope he's over that. But that can happen. Yeah. Very good. More sins against the first commandment. Not putting God first in our lives. I think we said that. Superstitions. Certain superstitions are harmless. You know, if a black cat walks in front of you, a step on a crack, break your mother's back. Right? These are harmless. You wouldn't walk under a ladder. Those things, as long as we know that they're, just myths, superstitions, legends, things like that, stories that people tell. If it's more comical than anything else, then it's okay. But if you truly think that this particular event, a particular person, or a particular object has those powers to actually call down evil on you or anything like that, then naturally that's a superstition and would be a sin against the first commandment. Astrology, if you really believed in that, would be a good example of that. Now the last one is the most common one. And everybody in here knows people who commit this sin against the first commandment every single day of their lives, and it's irreligion. Irreligion means, and you know people like this, I do too, where religion means nothing to them. It's just not important in their lives whatsoever. They've got so many more important things to do and talk about and be concerned with that's not even on the list. If you mention it, they'll go, oh yeah. And they might tell you what religion they are. That's what they were born and raised, but they've never paid any attention to it. In other words, they have not been seeking God and seeking a relationship with Him. And it's the worst possible thing that can happen. We pray for people like that something would happen, and that would initiate their conversion. And it does happen, because sometimes it's a death in the family that does it. I've had people that have just come to a baptism. They had a family member who had a baby, and they came to the baptism. When I do baptisms, I explain exactly what's going on all the time so that everybody's there, because I know there are people that are not part of the church that are there. And sometimes that inspires them to now begin a conversion process. Sometimes it's going to a wedding or something that happens, maybe an illness. But God pursues us because He wants this loving, intimate relationship with us, and He'll pursue us till the end of the earth, to the last breath of our lives, if He has to. But in the end, if we say, no, I'm not interested, then so be it, because we have free will. It's one of our gifts. Good. Okay. So that covers pretty well the first commandment and the most important one. The second commandment, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Okay? And I'll bet you that everyone in here knows people who do that. God damn this, God damn that. Jesus. Right? Things like that all the time. I hear it all the time from people. They're just so used to saying it, they don't even think about it. Right? Well, we are faithful to the second commandment when we show reverence and respect for the name of God in everything that we think, say, and do. Where we would not be the one to constantly slip out. Not that it could never happen, but we certainly wouldn't be the ones that are constantly slipping out with using the name of Jesus or God or reference to it in a vain type of way. Right? When we show respect. Sins against the second commandment would be things like this. This top one is the most common. It's the trivialization of the divine. In other words, making it something trivial, something not important, something that really doesn't matter, something very low on that totem pole, right? And especially doing that verbally, saying things that let people know that that's how you feel, or that's the way you think it is. Using God's name frivolously, like I just gave you examples of. Using profanities in general. If you are reflecting the love and goodness of God in your life by the way that you live and the way that you treat other people, and you are just a real nasty, dirty mouth person, well, then you're not reflecting the proper attitude. Right? Just misusing the gift of speech in general. People know us by what we say and do. They can't tell what we think, So they know us by what we say and do. And they know us really most by what we say. And so does what we say measure up to who we are called to be? Right? Misuse of the gift of speech. Right? Making an insincere oath. I got my fingers crossed behind my back when I promised this or that. Right? Breaking a vow. In our case, it would be marriage vows. In my case, it could be the vows that I made when I was ordained. All right, third commandment. This one is keep holy. Remember to keep holy the Lord's Day. The Lord's Day in Judaism was Saturday. But in Christianity, that has been changed to Sunday. Why would it be Sunday? What is it about Sunday?
It's the day the Lord
Died? On Friday.
died.
Right, the day of the resurrection. Right. That's exactly why Sunday is the Christian Sabbath, you could say. Okay? From the earliest times, the Christian communities gathered on Sundays. And what they celebrated at their Eucharistic celebrations was the risen Christ. Okay, so how could we keep this day holy? The Jews had been keeping the Sabbath holy all along. In fact, they had special laws about the Sabbath of what they couldn't do, any type of work they couldn't do. In fact, when the Pharisees, those were the Jewish leaders, when they saw the disciples picking grain, they said to Jesus, hey, look, your disciples are doing that. They're not supposed to do that on Sunday, or on Saturday, on the Sabbath. Right? So they had all kinds of laws about this. But the Christian church has always considered Sunday a sacred day. And sometimes we have to work on Sundays. And we can't avoid that because that's the way we make a living. And so the church isn't saying there's anything wrong with that. But somehow we should make this day different than the other 6 days of the week. And how could we do that? Well, we could think about it, and if it's possible not to work for wages, then we would do it. Or even competing for awards. Some people are so much into the particular sports that they participate in that it takes them away from church on Sunday because they are just altogether involved in that sport, and it keeps them from the practice of their faith. That would not be good. We would honor the commandment by trying to make this day sacred. Sometimes the best things to do on Sunday, other than go to Mass, that would be the main thing, would be to spend some time relaxing and doing nothing. Right? Sometimes we're so much into the sports that we participate in, the other athletic events, or our work, or even the chores that we do at home, that we don't take time to relax. And we need that time. Psychiatrists, psychologists, and physicians will tell us we need that time. And so, in some cases, taking that time is good for us. Maybe reading or studying religious materials, spending time with the Bible, spending time with other things that are religiously edifying. Right? There are hundreds and hundreds of great religious books. And remember the 4 pillars of Christian spirituality. We have to spend time in prayer. or else we have no relationship with God. We have to get to know him, so we have to spend time studying him, getting to know him. You're doing that by being here. And spend time with the Christian community, be part of that community. That's the fourth pillar. And then the fifth one was do service for others, especially people in need, right? So reading or studying or helping people in need or spending time with the Christian community in fellowship, those would be ways of honoring this commandment. Sometimes it's playing and enjoying your children or family, your brothers and sisters, your family. Sometimes we spend so much time outside of the family with work or with school or with our outside friends that we don't spend enough time within the family, together as a family, a community. And so spending that time, especially on Sunday, would be a way of honoring the third commandment. Other religious ed activities, if there are things. There is an exhibit. I don't know if you know this or not, but in Reynolds Hall, there's an exhibit. I visited the exhibit today myself this afternoon. I was not here this weekend. But that would be, visiting that exhibit would be an example of a religious education activity, because there are a couple of dozen different exhibits in there of Eucharistic miracles that have happened over the last few centuries around the world. And you can look at those exhibits, and it's fascinating to me. Service and charity. Some families make Sunday a time when they actually give back to the community or give back to others. There's a family in the parish here who especially felt this way, that they wanted to do a service for others on Sunday, especially to honor the Lord's Day. And so the husband of the family, which is Dr. Cody, Ronald Cody, he's an ear, nose, and throat doctor in Conyers and Covington. And he's also the director of our ministry that brings communion to the sick, the homebound, and the people in the nursing homes all over this area of Gwinnett County. He directs that, and he goes out every Sunday himself and gives communion to the sick. It's very good, him being an ear, nose, and throat doctor, to do that. And he has his family involved as well. So to do a service or a charity like that on Sunday is excellent. And the last one is not the least one, to spend time in prayer. That's the number one pillar of Christians' spirituality. We have no relationship with someone that we don't communicate with, so we have to develop a regular prayer life. And sometimes Sunday is the only day that we do it. Shouldn't be. But make that day special. How could we sin against the third commandment? Well, by spending little or no time in prayer or worship. You know, the C&Es, that's Catholics who come to Mass only on Christmas and Easter. We call them the C&Es. Okay? They spend little or no time in prayer and worship. There's no act of worship that is more powerful than participating in the Mass. Right? Not just standing there, but participating in the Mass. Right? Not making prayer and worship a priority in our lives. In other words, that's very down, very low. I got a million things to do before I even think about that. Right? Not attending Mass on Sunday. In one way or another, not making this day sacred. Preserving the sanctity of Sunday as the Lord's Day. One out of the 7 days that we devote to Him. Okay, so that took care of the three first commandments, the ones that had to do with our relationship with God. And I think we did pretty good at covering how we would honor them and how we would sin against them. And so we'll start on the next 7, which has to do with our relationship with other people. The fourth commandment has everything to do with family. It's honor your father and mother, right? Honor thy father and mother. So it's all about family. And family is critical. The family in the United States is something that's in jeopardy. There are forces that are actually at war against the family. Do you know that 50% of marriages end in divorce? That's crazy. 50. If you get married, you have a 50-50 chance of staying married, right? And because of that, and out of wedlock births, 40% of all children are raised by single parents. 40% of all children in the United States, almost, it's like 38%, or 38.5 or something, of all children are raised by single parents. A child deserves to have a mother and a father. If the father is missing, that child is deprived of something critical in their development. So the family is really in jeopardy because it used to be that those things were very rare in the culture in the United States. When I was a kid, it was very rare, divorces or single parents. But today it's not. Having a child out of wedlock was rare, and now it's very, very common. So it's just the way the culture has become is not conducive to family. But we have to know that the family is the foundation unit of society. As the family goes, so the whole society goes. And it's constituted. The family's constituted on the love between the parents, the spouses, and that bubbles up and over and on to the children, and they feel secure. The family should be the domestic church. It's where we first learn who God is in the family, at home. And we first experience God's love in the love that our parents have for one another and for us. That's how we experience God's love first, at home. Vatican II calls the family the domestic church. The family is a communion of persons. Communion means covenant union. And that draws the members of the family together in an intimate relationship. Right? The family is a privileged community. Everybody in that family is privileged. You're more important than the next door neighbors or your parents' bosses or anybody else, the mayor, the governor, the president, because you're a member of this family. And you're a vital member of the family. Every family member should feel like they're a vital member of that family, and they're part of the decisions that the family makes. Right? So, as family members, we have duties. There's duties of children and duties of parents. The children, according to the fourth commandment, honor thy father and mother, respect parents. Be grateful for what they have done. Every parent has sacrificed for their children. Obedience to the parents. Responsibilities towards parents, especially when they get older. Relationships with brothers and sisters. Sometimes brothers and sisters hate each other. Actually hate each other. When they are called to love one another. Especially in the family. Right? Lifelong love and support is what every member of the family should get from the other members of the family. We have duties towards, the parents have duties towards their children. The duties of parents are to provide for the education, including religious education of their children, to respect their children as created in the image and likeness of God and therefore of infinite value, to educate them in values, to be the domestic church, to introduce them, the parents are the primary teachers of the faith to their children. Introduce God to them and prayer to them. Where you first learn how to pray should be in the family, not in Sunday school. Actually evangelize the children. Parents are responsible for the physical, psychological, and spiritual needs of the children. It's the parents' responsibility to choose the schools that the children will attend as best that they can under the circumstances, and advise them as far as state in life. My mother and the good sisters at St. John the Evangelist Elementary School in Bergenfield, New Jersey, always thought that I had a vocation to be a priest. That's how I ended up in the seminary for the first 3 years of high school. Then when I quit, my mother was very disappointed because she still knew I had a vocation. And of course I did. That's why I'm a deacon. But I just didn't know it at the time. Okay. So how do we honor this? How do we honor this commandment? I've got to tell you that this class tonight is based on this book. It's called The 10 Commandments and the Significance of God's Laws in Everyday Life. It's by Dr. Laura Schlesinger. She's Jewish. And we got these 10 commandments. Christianity comes from the Jews. It comes from Exodus and Deuteronomy. They are part of the Hebrew Bible, the Torah, the book of the law. So she's perfectly legitimate teacher of the 10 Commandments. This book is great, and everything we're saying tonight actually comes from here. And I'm going to share some things with you from here. Taking time. A lot of families don't take time. We honor the family when we take time with the family. Scott?
Why are there two numbers?
Those numbers, good question. Those numbers remind me what page in the book I will find something to share with you on in Dr. Laura's book. That's what they are. So taking time with each other, communicating, talking to each other, having one meal a week together. Is that impossible? To have one meal a week as a family, and as a family we would share with one another. It should be every day, but a lot of times that doesn't happen. And
At group home, we do it every single day.
every day you have meals together and you talk together. And that's good. That's excellent. That should happen every day. But sometimes families say they never eat together. And I said, well, then make a resolution for 2015 that you're going to have at least one meal a week together, and during that time, the cell phones will be somewhere else, so nobody's texting or anything, and we're actually going to spend time with one another, sharing our joys and sorrows, and helping one another, right? We should hold one another accountable. We have brothers and sisters and other family members. Hold them accountable to the family, and also accountable to God, and accountable in other ways, what other ways they need to be accountable. In other words, to show up at work on time, to show up at school on time, to put the time in to get the good grades, or whatever is necessary, to spend more time in paying attention to their relationships. It's important for us as family members to give good example. I have the numbers 141 there, which gives me a page in Dr. Laura's book where I could share something with you from her. This is something I use all the time. This was a letter that a person sent to Dr. Laura, and she put this in her book, and she also read it on her radio program. The letter said, I am a 33-year-old male, the youngest of 9 children, and the proud father of a 3-year-old girl. I was thinking about what was really important to teach my daughter when I had a flashback of what my parents taught me and how I learned their lessons. I sat down and wrote it out. I wrote a tribute to my parents, and I thought you might like it. So he sends it to Dr. Laura. And here's what it said. As I ponder my life, I can't help thinking of the gifts that you gave me. I know we had very little money, but we lacked nothing of importance. I am as thankful for the things that we didn't have as I am for the things we did. I often wonder if I'll be able to provide for my children what you provided for me. You taught me by example to do what was right when you made me return a 5-cent item and explain my actions after I took it without permission at age 6. When I was 10, you taught me by example to treat others with dignity when you gave shelter and care to my friend who was beaten by his own family. You taught me by example that respect is more important than grades when I had a conflict with a teacher in the 7th grade. You taught me by example that acts of kindness are natural outpourings of a loving heart when you shoveled the neighbor's sidewalk instead of just your own. You taught me by example that one child was the most important thing in the world when you peeled my orange and wrapped it in foil and cut my cake in half and placed the icing in the middle so it wouldn't come off on the wax paper when you packed my lunch. You taught me by example the value of faith by attending Mass with us weekly when it would have been more convenient to stay home. You taught me the importance of giving when you placed your offering in the second collection for those who were less fortunate than we were. You taught me by example that honesty and integrity were more important than fortune when you struggled to pay your taxes rather than cheat on your return. You taught me by example to hold fast to my commitments by staying committed to each other for all those years. You taught me by example that reading is more important than television, that laughing is better than crying, and that time is more important than words. You taught me what it means to be a good parent. That's teaching by example. So all those things that his parents didn't even remember, he remembered for life, and so he wrote them a tribute and sent it to Dr. Laura, and she published it worldwide. So that's a wonderful tribute to good example within the family. And so to give, as family members, to give that good example. Forgiveness is necessary in families. Sometimes family members hurt one another. My mother and her 2 sisters lived right next door to their brother, my uncle. My brother and I never knew my uncle. We never knew him. We knew he was there. We knew that he was alive. We knew that he lived right next door, but we knew nothing about him. We weren't allowed to go over there. They never came over because my mother and her 2 sisters had some type of fight with their brother. And so they were estranged from one another. And they didn't talk. And they all died and went to their graves, never reconciling. They took that to their graves. And to this day, they're all dead now, and my brother and I do not know what it was that kept them apart like that. That's terrible. A family has to be about forgiveness. We have to be about protecting one another, where we would take a bullet for a father or mother or brother or sister. We have to be about solidarity, sticking together no matter what. And yes, it's going to take sacrifice, and it's going to take serving others and putting others ahead of ourselves. Do you know that authentic love is when we care more about the other person than we do for ourselves? If we marry somebody and that's their attitude, they care more about you than they care about themselves, don't you want that person? Don't you want them for life? Because that's how much they care about you. That's authentic love. So here's an acronym for family. FAMILY. Forget about me, I love you. Forget about me, FAMILY. Forget about me, I love you. That's the true acronym for family. That's true acronym for a couple. Right? Because that's authentic love. That's what John Paul II called authentic love. The self-giving love. Okay? All right. So now we know what we would do to honor the fourth commandment. It all has to do with family. Okay? And the authority of our parents is sometimes extended to others, right? I have teachers that tell me they work in schools where the kids are terrible. And the kids have no respect for their teachers. And nothing can get taught, and nothing is learned because there's constant commotion in the classroom. The authority of our parents extends to other rightful authorities, and that's the authority of teachers, the authority of the church, and sometimes there's guardians and babysitters. I mean, sometimes it's the elderly, the grandparents. Sometimes it's local and national leaders and whoever it has to be. There is authority that extends outside of the home. That we have to be mindful for because that's a right authority. Right? Sometimes the authorities can do things wrong, and I'm not saying to support that. Okay, well that was a good lesson about family. So let's move on to the fifth commandment because we've got 25 minutes left and we're going to get through them all. We have to get through them all because next Monday we start the sacraments, and you know there's only 6 sessions left. There's only 6 sessions left to the catechumenate. Because by then it'll be Lent, and we'll be spending Lent preparing in a special way for Easter and the Easter sacraments. So we have to finish this tonight. There's no time in those 6 sessions. They're all about sacraments. Okay, so the fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill. And the essence of this commandment, of course, is the sanctity of life. Right? How valuable every human life is. Infinitely valuable. Created in the image and likeness of God. How do we honor the fifth commandment? We respect life. We know that everyone is created in the image and likeness of God and is of infinite value, and we treat them as such, right? Including unborn babies. So we would be one who would defend the innocent. There's no one more innocent. That's why the church is so much on this abortion thing. Well, it's because there is no one more innocent. Murder is killing one that's innocent. Not one that tries to kill you and you kill them in self-defense, but the innocent. And no one is more innocent and defenseless than an unborn baby, right? Someone who safeguards peace, you know, could people call you a peacemaker? That they just make peace? They want peace? Want people to actually respect one another? To show love and compassion for others, inside and outside of the family. To uplift and support other people. And naturally to avoid war and conflict. Those are ways of honoring the fifth commandment. Sinning against the fifth commandment is a little bit more than just killing somebody, because the bar is raised in the new covenant, right? But here are some examples. There are things that you would expect. Of course, murder is at the top of the list, but abortion is a form of that too. Euthanasia is another form of that. Kidnapping, terrorism, assault and battery, even hatred. Sometimes anger. Now, sometimes there's justified anger, but sometimes we're just angry as can be about another person, and we wish harm to them. That's a sin against the fifth commandment. Embryonic stem cell harvesting. The church is only against embryonic stem cell harvesting because you have to kill so many fetuses to get what you have to get from that. Stem cells that come from other things, like adult stem cells, even from the umbilical cord. There's nothing wrong with that. But to slaughter innocent, unborn fetuses that are potential human beings is against the church's teaching. You could sin against the fifth commandment by failing to take care of yourself. You're sinning against yourself by not taking care of yourself, doing harm to yourself. Suicide would fall into this commandment. Failing to take care of the health of others that you could care for, right? I don't know what's on page 185, but I'm going to... well, let me see if it's worth sharing with you. I did this before where I shared all of these things, and the problem was that... this is only a couple of sentences. She says, look at your family tree and go back to your great-great-great-grandparents. And take note of the number of offspring who have come from your great-great-great-grandparents. It's going to be dozens, maybe even hundreds of family members, cousins and great cousins and all of that. And all of those people, most of the time hundreds of them, are alive just because of that couple, your great-great-great-grandparents. Well, what if they had been murdered before they were able to have children? The murder of a single person has a profound implications for the future, right? That was what was on 185 there. Okay. All right, well, that's pretty straightforward. Now we get to the sixth commandment. Thou shalt not commit adultery. So this is a big one, especially in our culture. And how could you honor this commandment? Well, at the top of the list, we have faithfulness and fidelity to our spouse. When we make those vows, those marriage vows, we say, I will love you and honor you all the days of my life. I tell the couple to look the other one, don't look at me. I say, you'll look at him, look him right in the eyes, and say it so everybody in this church can hear you. Just repeat after me. I will love you and honor you all the days of my life. Right? That's very, very important. That's a vow to the other person and a vow before God. Right? So faithfulness to that vow, fidelity to that vow, no matter what. Before that, they said, in sickness and in health, in good times and in bad, right? So no matter what happens, that's what we're doing when we get married. So faithfulness to that vow. Chastity, modesty. Some people buy the clothes that they wear, they're asking for it, right? Everybody here knows what I mean when I say that. They're asking for it. And so that's not respecting ourselves. It's not respecting certainly our spouses if we're married. And it's not respecting others. Marriage is meant to be selfless love. This forget about me, I love you thing. It's supposed to be self-giving. And wouldn't you want to be married to somebody who felt that way about you? They would do anything for you. They put you ahead of themselves. And they care about you more than they care about the other. They would sell their prized possession in order to get you something. Right? Selfless love. Self-giving love. John Paul II said that is living the law of the gift. You know, the law of the gift. He looked at Adam before he had Eve. And God said in Genesis, it is not good for man to be alone. And the animals didn't do it. He had to give the man something else because the man couldn't do what he was created to do. He couldn't live the law of the gift. He couldn't give himself fully and absolutely to another person. make himself a gift to the other person. So he created Eve, so that was then possible. And then what did Adam say when he saw Eve? This one is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. And she shall be called woman because she was taken from her man. Okay? From Adam's rib. But living the law of the gift in marriage is important. Right? We support and nurture one another. This I will share with you from page 234 here. Because this is a great story. She tells a story, Dr. Laura does, about a Baptist preacher in South Carolina who's a good example of marital fidelity and living the law of the gift. Okay? A Baptist preacher in South Carolina wanted nothing more out of life than to run a Bible college. All his life he worked for the position and eventually attained it. He became the president of a Bible college. As he fulfilled his life's dream and vocation, Alzheimer's disease struck his wife. Her health degenerated to the point where he couldn't possibly take care of her and work at his full-time job. The preacher came to a decision. He gave up his position as president of the Bible college. He quit. His peers were incredulous. "What are you doing?" they said. "Your wife doesn't even know who you are." And the man answered and said, "She might not know who I am, but I know who she is. She's the woman I made a promise to until death do us part." That was fidelity to the vow, faithfulness, no matter what. That's honoring the sixth commandment. Yes. Okay. How could we sin against the sixth commandment? Well, of course, at the top of the list is adultery. Now, I know I have divorce down there. And I know there are divorced people in here. Jan and I were previously married to other people and we're divorced as well. Okay? But sometimes divorce there's no other way. It just has to happen that way. There was a mistake was made in a choice that was made, or people sometimes were unfaithful to the vow that they made, and it's not your fault, right? I understand that 100%. But sometimes the sin of divorce would be when I'm leaving my wife, as many older men do, for a younger woman. Just because I think I'll get more pleasure out of her. I'm going to use her, and I'm leaving my wife. I'm divorcing her because I'm going to go elsewhere. Okay? That would be a blatant sin against the sixth commandment. Incest. Polygamy. I don't know how common that is today. In some places it is. Fornication, that is sex outside of marriage. Pornography. Prostitution. Rape, of course. Sexual abuse. Lust. Immodesty. Asking for it. Those are sins against the sixth commandment. So it's broader than adultery. You know, Jesus said that even a man who looks at another woman, married man, looks at another woman with lust in his heart, already sins. He already commits adultery because he had that in his heart, in his mind. Right? So, because that's going to lead to actually doing it. Okay, on the sixth commandment. Seventh commandment. Thou shalt not steal. This is a good one. How do we honor it? Well, truthfulness. In other words, do people know you as an honest person who can loan you their car, give you the key to their house, would not expect you to steal anything? They give you the key to the office if you work there because they trust you. You're trustworthy, right? And you don't mind working for a living. You just don't try to get handouts and whatnot. You actually work for a living. You You play your part in society. You give back. You do things that promote economic and social justice. You believe in that. If you have employees, you pay them a just wage. You care for the poor, right? Those who can't help it. There's a lot of poor people who it's not their fault, especially in other places other than the United States. You're born into that, you can never get out. Solidarity with others. In other words, we care about other people and we stick with them. I got your back. And we do works of mercy when we can. And the opportunities are all over the place. These are ways we honor that seventh commandment. We're not taking, we're giving. Right? How do we sin against the seventh commandment? Well, of course, on the top of the list is theft. Thou shalt not steal. Other things are also theft. Fraud. Right? Sometimes there's unjust social and economic structures where we actually steal from people, and it's not us, but it's the system. Paying unjust wages, in other words, we're cheating people by not paying them enough, or gouging customers if we have a business by charging too much. And here's some good questions for you. Is it stealing when it's from the company or the government, like we're cheating on the taxes, or we're stealing something from the company who has plenty? Of course it is. Still stealing. Is it stealing when they wouldn't really notice that it's gone and they have so much anyway?
Yes.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Is it stealing if it's just not fair that I don't have it, but so many other people have? And so I took it. Is it stealing when I intend to give it back eventually? Before they notice or need it? I used to go camping, and I had a friend of mine, a friend of Jan and ours, who went camping with us this one time. And we had a camper, but they brought a tent and put up the tent, and we were there for a long weekend, 3 or 4 days. And when we took everything apart, this person was very careful at the way that they packed up the tent. I said, boy, you're pretty meticulous about that. Oh yeah, I'm bringing it back to Walmart. In other words, I got it with the intention to just use it, and then you can bring anything back in 30 days and then bring it back. Is that stealing?
Yes.
Yeah. I know another guy who I used to play a lot of pool, billiards. I have a pool table in my house, and he would come over to the house all the time, and we would play pool. And one weekend he comes over, and he's got a new pool cue that I hadn't seen before. And I said, oh, Bill, when'd you get that? He goes, I found it. I said, you found it? I said, where did you find it? He goes, well, in a bowling alley. The particular bowling alley had pool tables in it, so you could play pool in there with 5 or 6 tables. And someone was playing there, and they left it there. And so he found it and took it home. Instead of leaving it there like he should have, because the person would realize it and come back, he should have just given it to the management who would hold it for the person to come back. So he says, well, finders keepers loses weepers. Okay? That is a sin against the okay. Oh, how about these excuses? I didn't know it was hot. The Rolex was only $50. How did you not know it was hot? The finders keepers loses weepers thing. I didn't steal it. It was their stupid mistake. In other words, the person who was checking me out at Kroger's gave me change for a 20 when I gave her a 5, not a 20. I saw it, And I just said, oh, well, that's their stupid mistake. And I put it in my pocket.
Right before Christmas, I bought a poinsettia. It was in my cart. They pulled the cart through. They put the bags in. I got home, and I always give them my receipt. Poinsettia wasn't charged to me. So I called Kroger's and said, can I just bring the receipt in? Do I have to bring the whole plant in? I can pull off a little paper on the bottom of the price. The lady said, pardon me? I said, there was a poinsettia in my basket. It didn't get rung up. I said, and I'd like to know, do I have to bring the whole thing back, or can I just bring the price tag that's on the bottom of the plant and the receipt to show you I hadn't paid? She said, Merry Christmas. She said, thank you so much for being honest. I was shocked that Kroger's actually gave it to you because they were amazed that somebody would call. That's sad.
Yeah. I'm only saying these things just to make sure that we're all aware of that. I deserve it because I don't have it. Or, oh, it's not hurting anyone. They won't miss it. They won't even know it's gone. Everyone else does it. Must be okay then. Some people in business think it's all fair in love, war, and business. Whatever I can get, whatever the traffic will bear, they say, whether it's a fair price or not. That's stealing. Okay, that was the seventh commandment, thou shalt not steal. Just gave you some ideas about expanding that one. In the next 6 minutes, eighth commandment, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. In other words, lying. So we honor that commandment because it's all about trust. Can people trust you? Are you known as someone that's trustworthy and honest? Right? Are you honorable? If you make a vow or an oath or a promise, do you keep it? Sometimes lies can kill. We all read about a young lady who committed suicide because some of her friends told some gossip and put it on social media and everything else, and she felt so depressed over this that she committed suicide. Lies can kill. Hypocrisy, being a hypocrite, right? Doing and saying the opposite of what we try to make people believe that we are, not being who we really are, right? Sometimes, is it ever right to lie? Never? What about that time that I told you that the family in Poland during it's 1942, during the time of the Nazis, when they were rounding up Jews and sending them to concentration camps where they would be killed, and you were not allowed to keep a Jewish family in your house, and if the police came to your door and asked you if there were any Jews in the house, and you said no, but there was a family in your basement that you were keeping there, you lied. Was that a right thing to do? Yes. The reason it was is because your intention was not to lie for the sake of lying, for your own benefit, and the lies are for our own benefit, the ones that are wrong. You did that not for the purpose of lying, but the purpose of saving the lives of those people. So in that case, the circumstances made it right. It made it the right thing to do. Because circumstance and intention are important. We said that the last session about circumstance and intention. So it could be right to lie. It's generally wrong. Because generally when we lie, it's for ourselves. It's for a selfish reason. Remember that the root of all evil, what makes sin sin 9 out of 10 times, is selfishness. Right? Okay. So how do we honor this commandment? Well, being truthful. And people know that we're truthful. When we tell them something, they believe us because it's in our nature. It's part of our character. We respect others and their dignity. We're for justice, right? We honor justice. We are known as people of responsibility. We're responsible people. We could be in charge of things. People will give us responsibility because they know that we'll honor it. In fact, we can honor this commandment by witnessing to the gospel, by the way we live and what we say. And how do we sin against this commandment? Well, lying, perjury, slander, right? Saying things that detract from other people, detraction. Sometimes boasting, In other words, we just want to make ourselves look good, and sometimes in making ourselves look good, we make other people look bad.
It's sort of like saying,
we put them down.
I know more than you.
Yeah, right. You're trying to make yourself look good, and in order to do that, you're making someone else look bad. A lot of times we do that without even thinking of it, and we shouldn't. Hypocrisy, right? Being a hypocrite, right? We don't act out who we really are. We try to be somebody we're not even. Okay. Last ones, 9th and 10th commandment. I put them together because they are the covets. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods. And number 10 is, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. Right? To covet is to desire something, I really want that. I'll do anything for that. Right? Well, how do we honor this commandment? Well, purity and chastity. In other words, we're not asking for it. Okay? We're not trying to get our neighbor to, desire us.
If they have their own money, they need to buy it themselves.
Yeah, if they have their own money, they need to buy it themselves. That's right, rather than steal it, that's for sure. We should direct our affections appropriately to our family and our spouses, and not inappropriately to just anybody. We should make sacrifices for the sake of others and appreciate the gifts that God has given us, not wanting what is not ours. That's the way we honor these 2 commandments. How we sin against them is impurity, lust, wanting something that just isn't ours and that we can't have, but we want it anyway. Greed, we'll do anything for the almighty dollar. Avarice is excessive greed, excessive wanting selfishness, right? Envy, we want something that belongs to others. Okay, want things that belong to others. I think there's something, just in closing, that I wanted to share with you on 314 here. This is a wonderful book. If you have the opportunity to get this book, you can get it on Amazon.com for. Yes, of course. It's $14.95 on Amazon. This is just a little poem, just to close with. It's about success. Success is speaking words of praise, in cheering other people's ways, in doing just the best you can with every task and every plan. It's silence when your speech would hurt, politeness when your neighbor's curt. It's deafness when the scandal flows. It's sympathy with others' woes. It's courage when disaster falls. It's patient when the hours are long. It's found in laughter and in song. It's in silent time of prayer, in happiness and despair. In all of life and nothing else, we find the thing we call success. And so, I hope that was helpful at expanding the 10 Commandments, and I hope it's given us really a solid closing to the subject of Christian morality. Okay? Next week is...